All right, for you guys who don't know, but I just told you, I'm Rachel Hauck. I'm a full-time novelist. Been full-time for 20 years. I write in the Christian space. I write commercial fiction. And by a strike of lightning, I hit the New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal with a book called The Wedding Dress. Another strike of lightning, and I had a book, Once Upon a Prince, made into a Hallmark movie. Other than that, my claims to fame are helping people write novels, like you guys, or write stories. So we're going to talk about writing a brilliant story. But this is for anything you want to write. I teach it a lot to novelists, but if you want to write nonfiction, creative nonfiction, this works. If you want to write a memoir, this works. If you know somebody who wants to write a memoir, this works. We were talking earlier with Ben about writing creative nonfiction. And so any kind of writing that you want to do, this is going to work for you. And I love that all the sessions today were about the discipline of writing. Like, we don't like it. Anybody ever heard the term plotters and pantsers? So there's those who plot their novels or plot their stories. And then there's what we call the pantsers. They just sit down, they have an idea, and they write. A lot of novelists write that way. I'm a plantser. I do a little bit of both. And everybody pantses a little bit in the middle. But I also use this story equation to help me design the story. Because how many of you started to write something and you went on it, you went into it with fire, you loved what you were writing, and you got about one chapter and you like, okay, now I don't know what to do. You kind of burn out. I used to do that all the time. So I used to train newspapers for the computer systems we installed, and I traveled around the world. And I was in Venezuela, and I wrote this story while they were doing their practice. And I wrote this story about, I don't even remember, it was a little beginning of a love story. And it burned out real quick. But somehow the guys in the production room read it. And I don't know how, because I wrote it in English, but they must have figured out what it meant in English. I went back about a month later, and they said, Raquel, ¿qué pasó? What happened to your story? And I'm like, what story? You know, the story. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I still don't know. And to this day, I don't know. So that's what frustrated me when I started. I didn't know where I was going. The story equation will help you figure out where you're going. So it's really a toolbox to enhance what you want to do. All right. I'm just giving you, this also has a book called The Story Equation, written by Susie May Warren. Susie and I have been writing together as partners for about 22 years. We kind of grew up learning this process together. I'll stand out of the way. And so, but she's the one who can teach it and quantify it, and so I'm just borrowing all of her brilliant ideas. But we've had a lot of fun teaching others to use the story equation and other things. She's a brilliant teacher. She has a thing called novel.academy that I recommend. They have Thursday night chats. So if you really want to start learning a lot about writing and about storytelling, check out novel.academy.com. But I recommend this book. So, okay, a story is about an ordinary person doing something extraordinary. And when we think extraordinary, we usually think a superhero, overcoming a great sickness, overcoming a great disaster, maybe founding a country. But anything that you do to overcome is extraordinary. So anything your ordinary characters do in your story, do something that's hard for them. It's extraordinary that you forgave your abuser. It's extraordinary that you quit your job and started a business. It's extraordinary that you love someone who is unloving to you. That's what your story is about, at the heart of your story. So why an equation? To create a solid inner journey. So when you're writing your novel, your memoir, whatever you want to write, really it's about what change is going to happen in the interior of the character. Everybody talks about plot-driven or character-driven books. All books are character-driven. Some have more plot than others, like a thriller, like a Jason Bourne. Would we care about Jason Bourne if we didn't know what he was dealing with on the inner man? No. Just like some guy who's going around kicking butt all over the world. So what? This guy's trying to find himself. This guy's a trained killer, and he doesn't even know it. So that's why we care about him and his love for Marie and that whole love story that's in the midst of this. So you want to create a solid inner journey because that's what's going to drive the character. To create a cohesive external journey. What's the external journey? That's the external physical plot. That physical plot is impacted by what's happening on the inside. So if I'm trying to get my character to take a leap of faith, quit their job, and start a business, I have to deal with the fear on the inside. I can't just go, hey, Rachel, let's quit your job and start a business. Okay, let's do that. Really boring. We don't care. We have to see the struggle. It's always about that internal struggle. We're going to talk more about what your character's internal struggle is going to be. And that's what you're going to heal. That's your epiphany, your truth, your happily ever after ending. So the plot and the external story and the internal story are married together. Picture a spine. That's your internal story. Everything that happens to that is outside of that. The external story has to hook onto that spine. It has to make sense with what's happening on the inside. And we're going to talk about how to build that. You want to align actions with motivations. We've all seen TV shows, movies, read books, and they're like, why is the character doing that? Right? So this is about the story equation is going to help you design your motivation. Make sure that the things you have your characters do actually are motivated. And if you don't remember anything about this class, remember motivation. Is my character motivated to do what I'm about to make them do? All right, we want to produce authentic characters. We love reading about authentic characters. We're going to have two examples, Benjamin Martin from The Patriot and Walter Mitty from the movie Mitty. And we're going to take a look at their journey as examples. But even going back to Jason Bourne, he was an authentic character. That whole backstory they gave him made him an authentic character. If any of you have ever looked into writing a character before, sometimes what you'll find online is a character checklist. And those are great, but they're usually like what color's their hair, what color's their eyes, where were they born, how old are they? And you do need all of those things, but those aren't the things that build your character. The thing that builds your character that's going to drive that story and that's going to help you get through the middle on the hard days is that you know what they're about on the inside. You know what they want. Just a checklist, that's kind of nice, but you really want to, you're building a person. You're building your own Frankenstein. And it does act kind of as a checklist. So with my writing partner, I'll call her, we'll brainstorm out the story equation, which we're about to take a look at. And so I'll call her in the middle of a book, and I go, I'm stuck. And she goes, well, where's your character in their lie journey? What's their fear? Where are you at? And so it gives us language that we can use to help us figure out where we're at in the book and what my next move for the character might be, because I know where I want them to be. So it can help with that. So if you're here with somebody, you guys can be partners together. All right. This is the basic story equation. It looks like a cookie. I don't know why it doesn't look like anything mathematical, although we have one of those samples too. All right, all stories really are about the dark moment story of the past. Can everybody see that? Everybody has a moment, and all of us do, in our life where that was kind of a dark moment. Whether it happened to us or whether it was something we did, a choice we made, it's kind of that dark moment story. So when you start thinking of your character, I want to write a story about a guy who works for the FBI. Okay, great. What's his dark moment story? What happened to him in the past that makes him want to be a man of justice? Did he see injustice? Was his family treated unjustly? Were his parents arrested for not doing anything wrong? Was his dad arrested and his mom then had to get a job and the family fell apart? It's dark. It's all of those things that we don't really want to talk about. You can still have a Pollyanna story, because I like Pollyanna stories, but I always have this dark moment story. All right, because of the dark moment story, there's a wound. This is an emotional thing. If your parents divorced, and you overhear them talking about, well, if we hadn't had kids, we would be able to do the things we want, but now we're just fighting, so let's get divorced. Now the kid has a wound. My parents are getting divorced because of me. And so whenever they think about their parents or whenever they think about their childhood, they feel that pain. So that wound, though, as they grow up, gets wrapped with life. They don't even know it's there anymore. They've dealt with it. They've made peace with the parents' divorce. They've made peace with that wound of the past. But what they don't know If pressure comes from the outside, that wound is going to resurrect itself. And ultimately, at the end of the story, the wound is the thing that you're going to heal. So the wound, that pain, creates a lie. So this is what we call the wound, lie, fear journey of your character. So if you overheard your parents saying they were getting divorced because they had you, what would your lie be? I'm not worth anything. I'm no good. I'm not wanted. Right? You would start developing, maybe I should run away. Maybe it would be better if I was dead. And then that lie turns into a fear. And if you think about all of the little lies we might believe, they might be tied to a little wound or a little fear. So the lie becomes a fear, the fear of no one will ever love me. I'm never going to be good at anything. I'm not going to have happiness. Whatever that lie is, I'm being a little high level, but you can dig down really deep. If you ask why, that's another great question. Always ask why. Put why real big in your notes. If you say, well, why do you believe that? Why do you want to do that? Why is that your favorite song, even as you're talking to your characters? But that fear is tied to that emotional wound. But there's light. It's called the secret desire or the greatest dream. The secret desire, I call it the God-given thing within inside you. And that thing wants out. It is tired of living under the wound, the lie, and the fear, and it's going, I want out. I want out. I want out. So the inciting incident of the story, so you guys know a story has an inciting incident. We run through the middle. There's some change in the middle. We get to a black moment, and then we kind of recoup from the black moment, and then we have a happily ever after or a satisfying ending. So that secret desire becomes your gas. That's going, you know what? I'm not living under this anymore. I want out. I see an opportunity, and fear, you're not going to stop me this time. Now, fear is going to battle throughout the story. All the insecurities will come up, but that secret desire wants out. Does that make sense? So let's just do a real simple one, dark moment story. Kid hears the parents say, if we never had this kid, our marriage would be great, our life would be great, we're getting divorced. It's my fault. That's the lie he believes. Now he has a fear that he can't do anything right, and no one will ever love him. So I'm not going to be a success, so who would love me, right? And then, but the secret desire is, I want to fall in love, and I want to be a success. Usually when you're developing, you'll get more specific. They want to be a success at songwriting. They want to be a success in the corporate world. They want to run a successful construction business. They want to fall in love with Tom or Bill wants to fall in love with Susie or Jane. You'll be a little bit more specific because you'll have the details of your external story. Does that make sense? All right, let's talk about Benjamin Martin. Who's seen the movie The Patriot? Okay, good. What's Benjamin Martin's wound? What's his dark moment story from the past? His family, but remember Fort Wilderness? He brutally killed the Native Americans at Fort Wilderness. And the opening line of the movie is, I've long since fears that my past sins or something will come to haunt me, come to reside on me, something to that effect. I have a quote over there. So now that's his wound in the story. It causes him pain. In fact, his sons will say, Dad, wherever we go, men buy you drinks. Men celebrate you for Fort Wilderness. What happened? And he refuses to tell them. So what's his lie? As a result of that action that he took, so it can be an action that you took or an action that someone else took against you. If you're a child, it's usually something against you, or maybe you weren't looking for your little brother and he fell off of the bicycle and he broke his arm, and so you feel this kind of internal guilt because you're young and you don't understand accidents happen, right? So if it's a young, dark moment story, they don't have an opportunity to really understand it, and as you grow older, you just leave it in the past until the story comes along and starts awakening that wound. If it's an adult, it's something pretty powerful like, I brutally killed people, or, I ruined someone's life, I ruined their finances, or I got divorced, or whatever. So with Benjamin Martin, that lie is, I am not honorable. I am not a good man. So he's spending his life with his children. He's a widower. He's trying to live a good life. He's trying to be a good man. What his fear is that he will do it again. Now, the Revolutionary War is on his front yard. They live in South Carolina. I actually think it's the Battle of Cowpens, which I wrote about in my book called The Love Letter, because it's right there in that South Carolina area, and the last battle looks like the Battle of Cowpens, which was the battle that changed the war, actually, for us. And so he is not going to fight. And even though his sons are like, Dad, we have to fight. You're a patriot, because his secret desire is to be an honorable man and to be a patriot and fight for his country. But he can't do it because that wound-life fear is totally functioning in this adult man, even though that was probably 20 years ago, right? Does that make sense? All right, Walter Mitty. What do we know about Walter Mitty? Anybody seen this movie? I recommend this movie. So great. Tons of metaphors and symbolism. Okay, Walter is this white shirt, black tie, black slacks, buttoned-up kind of guy. He works in the negative assets room for Life magazine. In other words, he handles all the negatives of all of their photographs that they've ever had. He is uber responsible, and we're going to see a clip from the movie that will demonstrate his dark moment story. But he is, man, I take care of my stuff. I take care of my job, and I take care of my family. So his dad died. That's his dark moment story. He had a dream to backpack through Europe. That ended because he had to quit that dream, get a job at 17, and help take care of his mom and sister. So his wound is that his dad died, who he was close to, and also that he had to give up on his dreams, and he had to become Mr. Responsibility. So the lie is, I can't be Walter Mitty. I have to be there for my family, there for my job. I am Mr. Responsibility. The fear is that if he tries to do something on his own, he'll fail, or that he'll disappoint people. But that secret desire is in the movie because he lives in his head. He has all these fantasies in his head. We're going to see a clip of that in a few minutes. But he has this whole adventure world in his head. He wants to go on adventures, but that Mr. Responsibility won't let him because he doesn't know how to marry responsibility and adventure yet. So that's Walter Mitty's story. Okay, this is another view of the SCQ just from the math majors. Wound plus lie equals the fear, divided by the secret desire, equals your character arc. And that's how we know the arc of your character. Remember, you're going to heal that wound. You're going to turn the lie into a truth, and you're going to conquer the fear. All right, here is a more expanded story equation. We were teaching the story equation at a writer's retreat in Destin, Florida a few years ago, and we would break into groups, and we would go, and we would talk about our stories, because all these people came in to help us develop their stories, and they were all talking about their wound and their lie and their fear and all this negative stuff, and I'm like, wait, they can't walk onto the page in that. They got to walk on the page in charge of their life. We want competent characters. You don't want, Eeyore to walk on the page. You were, boom, right? So we created this top half, and this is the positive things about your character. So let's start in the middle of this circle, though. Character identity. That's your noun and your adjective, or your adjective and your noun. So what would Benjamin Martin be? A wounded warrior, a wounded family man, a dishonorable warrior. Those would be your adjectives for him when you start the story. Walter Mitty would be responsible daydreamer. He's responsible, he's a daydreamer, but he doesn't do anything about it. And then there's the moral sinner. That's just like that line that they will not cross. So that you always have to have some kind of moral sinner. I recommend The Moral Premise by Stanley Williams if you guys want to look into that book. And then you have kind of the dark moment story, which we talked about, and we'll talk about further. So the positive thing is you have an endearing flaw. So Benjamin Martin's endearing flaw is he just kind of doesn't listen to anybody. He's his own man. And also, he doesn't know how to make rocking chairs. Right? He's kind. He has freed slaves on his plantation, loves his family, right? He's a good man. We see the good things about him. So you want to see what's their immediate goal. So when the story opens, there's always a story goal. They want to have adventures and fall in love. Or Jason Bourne wants to find out who he really is. Benjamin Martin probably wants to discover that he's a man of honor. Walter Mitty wants to actually go on an adventure. Well, the immediate one for Benjamin Martin is to keep his sons out of war and keep his family out of war. The immediate goal for Walter Mitty is to find the final negative for the final print copy of Life magazine. So they have a photographer named Sean, played by Sean Penn, who has sent in the final photograph for the final issue of Life magazine. He sends it to Walter. Walter can't find it. So his immediate goal is to find that negative. He's got these kind of immature, bullying bosses telling him, you have to find that. People are being laid off. And Mr. Responsibility takes all that on himself. He didn't ever see it, but he blames himself for it being lost. All right, so you want to have that immediate goal. They want to go on a date. They want to get a promotion on the job. Whatever your story is, if you're writing a teen story, maybe they want to get an invitation to a prom. If you're writing a vampire story, figure that out. All right, what's their competence? What are they good at? We really want to see characters that are good at something. We want to see some confidence. How many of you realize that you have wounds of the past and you believe lies and fears, but you didn't live in them all the time? They just surfaced every once in a while. But on your job and with your friends and family, you're competent. You do things well. People say, oh, you're so good at that. You do that so well. Well, we want to see that with our characters. Benjamin Martin's competence. He's a great father. He's a great farmer. He's a great businessman. Walter Mitty, great at his job, great at taking care of people. And then you add the superpower. That's that little touch above. That's the thing that they can do in the story that no one else can do. Benjamin Martin, his is pretty clear. Once he gets into the battle, he's the ghost. He knows how to get in and out of the swamp and get in and out of that region without the British soldiers ever knowing where he was. They called him the ghost. So that's part of his story. Walter's is kind of has a weird superpower, just part of his uber responsibility, but in a way, all the adventures that he lives in his head could be considered kind of a superpower. You could have a cop character who's really good at his job, but boy, he can tell when people are lying. He just knows. So if you're writing some kind of thriller, they have the ability to see something that nobody else on the page can see. When I wrote the book, The Wedding Dress, my character Charlotte owned a bridal shop, and she could dress any bride immediately. So it was kind of her superpower. She didn't just sell you a wedding dress. She picked the dress that you loved, that made you look like the princess bride you wanted to be. Oddly enough, she couldn't dress herself to be a bride. Okay, does that make sense? So that's kind of like the top half of your equation. So now you've really developed a character that's good at something, they're lively, they're competent, but they're harboring some wounds that we're going to heal. All right, we're going to look at Walter's dark moment story. There's going to be 3 clips kind of pushed together. So just kind of pay attention, and if you have any questions when it's over, I can fill in the blanks for you. All right, are we ready for this? It's very soft when it starts, so it will get louder. Okay, we see that he hasn't done anything that he wants to do, and that's the kind of man that she's looking for. And we all have to be. Okay, do we feel the emotion of that? You felt the connection between the two of them because they made themselves vulnerable. So your characters are going to have to do that. And even if you're telling your own story, and there are things to have precautions about if you're involving other people, but even being vulnerable in your own story or a devotion that you're writing brings the reader or the viewer into the story so that they relate. You want empathy, not sympathy. Empathy means I relate. Sympathy means I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for you doesn't necessarily mean, oh man, I feel what you feel. I had something similar. Right? So this created empathy, but he's not all the way there, even though he's left New York, he's gone to Greenland, he's swam with the porpoise, and he's gone on to Iceland, and he's knocking down so many walls. What he can't do, though, is quite cross that bridge yet with Cheryl, and he bought her son, or he has it for her son, a skateboard, but he couldn't quite get there. He's not quite that vulnerable yet. So it doesn't all drop in one fell swoop. You bring it along little by little. And so that's what we see here with Walter. And so what was his motivation? Responsibility to do his job. And he had to leave his fears, leave his lie, face that wound, and go out and get that negative asset. He had to find Sean to find out what happened to the negative asset. And Sean's in the middle of Afghanistan mountains somewhere. All right, does that make sense? Any questions about that? I do recommend the movie. There's lots of other great things in the movie that relate to story and symbolism and about his backstory. All right, the secret sauce of the dark moment story is, it is a story. It has to be specific, relatable, and poignant. So when you're starting your draft, you might say, when she was little, she was sick off and on all through elementary school. She didn't have any friends. Okay, that's great. What specific thing happened in elementary school that caused a deeper wound that was facilitated by her illness? So she wasn't in any school pictures. And there may be one particular moment of trying to be in the school picture, and that's where your daydream goes. That's where you pull from real life. You pull from your life. My husband says when anybody starts telling a story and I lean in, he goes, hold it. Anything you say can and probably will show up in one of her books. So we had this kid one time. I said for a season, Tony, my husband, taught at a private school, taught math and science, I think math, at a private school. And that Christmas, that we had a Christmas party at one of the other teachers' houses. And we're sitting down, and a young teacher and her husband are across from us, and he's not eating. Everyone else is eating. He's not eating. And I'm like, why aren't you eating? And he said, I don't eat food at other people's houses. I'm like, what? Because I don't eat food at other people's houses. As a writer, any kind of writer, what's your next question? Why not? We're always asking. We're nosy. We want to know why. I said, why not? He goes, I haven't seen how it was prepared. And I look, there's her kitchen. Go open her fridge. Go open her stove. Look in the cupboard. You can see how, in the atmosphere in which it was prepared. I said, well, what do you eat? Pizza. I'm like, frozen pizza? Pizza at a restaurant? Have you read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential? You'll never eat out again. We don't know. You eat hot dogs? You know how hot dogs are prepared? And I kept drilling him. Does anybody else in this family has this phobia? How do you live with the phobia, I say to the wife. And I think by the end, he was kind of doubting his own phobia. So you got to lean in a little bit. Don't make people uncomfortable, but you have to lean in a little bit. And I think I have used that little tidbit for some character along the way. But you really want to have a moment with a specific feeling and a specific reaction. Because later on, just like we saw with Walter, your hero and your heroine, or your two protagonists, your two brothers, your two superheroes, whatever you're writing, they're going to share that story with one another. And that's what deepens the intimacy. That's what makes them vulnerable. And that's really what draws the reader in all the more. We're rooting for them. All right, this is another great question I always ask. What can the reader do in the end that they cannot do in the beginning? Walter could not even, it took everything he had to leave Cheryl an electronic wink, right? And even then, it just made him so nervous. What does he do in the end? I'll spoil it for you guys. It's still worth watching the movie. They actually are going on a date. And I think he holds her hand. So this is huge for Walter. What can Benjamin Martin do at the end that he couldn't do in the beginning? Fight with honor. He could control himself. He redeemed himself by fighting with honor. Sometimes when I'm stuck along the way, I say, oh, wait, what can they do in the end they can't do in the beginning? Or I'll do all of the story equation. I'll do that little cookie. What's their competence and superpower? What is it they want when the story opens? What's their overall story goal? What's their wound, life, fear? I'll do all that, and I have it all down. And I go, yeah, but what are they going to do in the end they can't do in the beginning? And that kind of begins to give you your external plot. And again, if you're writing a devotion or any kind of creative nonfiction, you use all of these tools because what do I want the reader to get at the end that they aren't going to get in the beginning? What if you're writing a book about overcoming a wound or overcoming something in the past or just loving the Lord more? You're starting here with they're probably at this level of loving the Lord, but at the end you want them to have this level of understanding about loving the Lord. So you're bringing everything that you write is bringing the reader to an end where they can actually see themselves in the story. Stories and writing is the only place where the reader actually gets to insert themselves into the page. Everything else kind of comes at us. Music invites us into the story as well, but movies kind of come at us and we're always we feel it, but people actually can see themselves in the story. So what can they do that they can't in the end that they can't do in the beginning? Really, really crucial. That one sometimes pulls me out of the water, out of being stuck. All right, this is another great thing to help you understand why we're doing a story equation. You want to figure out the essential elements of your character, whether that character is you. Let's say you want to write your story. You've had some pretty amazing things that have happened in your life, or you're working with someone else to tell their story. Hone in on one part of the story, the most extravagant, the most, the most extraordinary part. The part has the most meaning. We can hear you, Libby. So how do you want to zoom in on that, okay? So if you're working on a memoir, you don't want to tell your whole life story. You want to tell a piece of your life story, because too much, you overwhelm. Not enough, it doesn't make an impact. Same with the devotion. If you want to write a devotion, there's a tendency to want, but this works, and this works, and this works. Nope, just leave it on, overcoming anxiety, or finding the love of God, the power of the love of God, or, how to be a worshiper, even though you don't play an instrument or you can't sing. Whatever it is, you want to hone in on, you want to be specific. So, what's your character's identity? That's when your character walks onto the page, or when you walk onto the page, or when your theme walks onto the page. That's our identity. Benjamin Martin, when he walks on the page, he's a dishonorable man. He's a dishonorable warrior and a man. But he's trying his hardest to do his best by his family. Walter is kind of a timid dreamer, a timid, responsible man. He's very timid. Shrek, how many of you have seen the movie Shrek? He's an ogre, but what is he in the end? A prince. His identity, he thinks he's an ogre, and his identity through most of the movie is an ogre. But then the truth comes, and he's set free to be a prince. What's your character's essence? That's who they will become. And that's part of the secret desire. I'm tired of living under the wound, the lie, and the fear. I'm tired of being the kid who caused my parents to divorce. I'm an adult now. I know that's not true. That's on them. Maybe you've even had a conversation with your parents about it, but you still carry that wound. And the journey that your character goes on is going to end up healing that wound. How many of you ever watched Gilmore Girls? Yeah. All right. Luke and Lorelai are a hero and heroine who see each other's essence and pulls it out of them. Like Luke's identity is the grumpy diner. He wants to stay behind the counter. He wants to stay out of town business. And what does Lorelai do? She keeps pulling him into it. You need family. You're a good man. You need to contribute to this community. Lorelai wants to be in all the community, up in everybody's business, but she does not want to be in her family. Luke keeps telling her, you need to be in your family. That's who you are. You need to embrace that. That's part of who you are. And so the hero and the heroine, if you have any kind of love story, they should pull out the best in one another. If you don't have a hero and heroine, your two protagonists, your best friends, your cop partners, whatever, they should bring out the best in each other. What's your character's competence? We talked about that. What are they good at? This is part of their external story. A lot of times, their competence is tied to their career. So my characters always have a career. I want them to do something, have something that they want to focus on, because most of us work. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're working. What is important to him? So this is where you have the values, and that's a little more expanded teaching of this class. But be thinking about what is your character's values? What's the one thing they would never do? And don't have them do it. But usually it's friendship versus family, career versus family, past versus present. What are their values? Their spirituality, relationships. Usually it's a career relationship kind of battle. Do they value money, or do they value experiences? Do they value gifts, or do they value relationships? So if you've got characters that are always giving gifts to someone who values experiences and relationship, that's not going to mean that much to them. And again, all this is high level, because once you know what your story is about, you can plug these things in to tailor them to your character a little closer. And then what's their initial goal? So when you open the story, what is their initial goal? What do they want? They want a promotion. They want a date. They want to confront somebody. They want to get the bad guy. Whatever your story is about, what's their initial goal? And then you're going to have an overall story goal that you'll achieve when they do something in the end they can't do in the beginning. Again, Walter's initial goal is to find that negative for the final print Life magazine. But his overall goal is to break out of this lockdown life, colorless life that he lives. Benjamin Martin's initial goal is to keep his sons out of the war, keep the war out of his yard. But overall goal is he wishes he was a man of honor and he wants to fight with honor. And does he fail? He fails right away because his son Thomas is killed by the British and Gabriel is taken captive. So he takes the two youngest sons that he's taught to shoot and he goes running off to rescue Gabriel, and that's where he gets the term, he's a ghost. So he's doing his superpower, jumping behind trees, shooting, throwing hatchets, and then when he finally gets Gabriel and he's killing the British, he just brutally hatchets one guy. I mean, the guy's dead, quit. And he did it before his sons. So there's always that element too, that they initially fail at what they're trying to do. Like Walter fails with Cheryl. There's a scene where he fails with Cheryl, trying to build a relationship with her. So that kind of reinforced to Benjamin, I am not going to be an honorable soldier, and I'm not going to live. I'm not going to do this. But he gets called into the fight as the fight keeps coming to his front yard, quite literally. All right. I hope that makes sense. All right, this is your spine. This is your external structure. So I always think of it like this. I have all of my wound, life, fear, my confidence, my strength, what's good about the character, what we're going to fight, and what we're going to heal throughout the story. And then the spine is my external plot that's going to get at all of these things. It's going to make their good stuff shine, and it's going to make their bad stuff get healed and delivered from. And I took those things onto the spine, so I don't have anything that happens externally that doesn't. Well, actually, the spine is that dark moment story, the good and the bad. And then what happens on the outside, I hook onto that. So I don't have anything external happen to them that's not going to get at what they want, get at that fear, expose that fear. So that kind of helps keep your story in line. So, I've written scenes where I thought, yeah, that's a great scene, but I can't keep it. Don't be afraid to delete. Have a saved file, just in case, but don't be afraid to delete. So the spine is that internal journey, and then the external is what's going to get at it. Okay, Act 1. If you've done any screenwriting, you know this. Act 1 is life. So your character's going to walk onto the page. They're competent. Maybe they're in their superpower. They may say to their desk mate, I'm going to talk to the boss today about that promotion. He said it was mine. So we see what they want. Oh, we're going to sign on a house. Or, hey, tonight's the big date. Woohoo. So it's whatever that initial want is. And then you're going to have the inciting incident. The boss comes out and says, hey, everybody, I just promoted Bill. And so your Tom goes, what? I thought I was getting that job. Now what? And he was banking his financial goals and that house goal on that promotion. So now he knows that this isn't the right job for him. He knows he's wanted to quit and go do art or something. And so this inciting incident is driving him to go, why won't you quit? Because, man, when I was growing up, we didn't have any money. I can't. So in Walter, we see Walter's life, very responsible, doing his job. Where's the negative for the final cover of Life magazine? We don't know where it is. The brutal, immature boss says, you better find it. And so he goes, all right. I got to get out of my fear, and I got to go find it. And that's the noble quest. The word noble just means it's a worthy quest for your heroine and hero. If it's they just want to go on a date or, that's fine. That's noble. Just make it worthy. It has to fit the character that you've designed. So don't feel like you have to be a superhero or a Jason Bourne or a Walter Mitty living in his head or a Benjamin Martin. Those are great characters, but if you're just writing a love story, it still works. The desire to fall in love is the greatest passion in the human experience. So it just has to be a worthy, It can't be that they want to get revenge on somebody. All right, let's see, here we go. Then you go to Act 2, which we all know is just the disappointments, the things fail. Walter Mitty gets on a plane, goes to Greenland, and he can't find Sean. He gets on a helicopter with a drunk pilot. He ends up having to jump into the water to get on a ship to try to find Sean. He ends up in Iceland. Like he's failing. He's not finding Sean, but he's way out of his comfort zone, Benjamin Martin, man, he brutally kills that British soldier. He's ashamed of himself, but then there's a connecting scene that I forgot, but he ends up heading up the militia. I think he goes into Charleston, and they all want to fight. He's trying not to fight. He's arguing against it. I'm a patriot, but I don't want to fight. I don't want my children to be orphans. But he ends up heading a militia, and he does so with honor for the most part, especially when his son challenges him. So he has some disappointments and challenges along the way as well. So you always want to have those. You'll have that man in the mirror moment or that moral center where they go, I'm going to be an honorable soldier. I don't care what you did, but I'm going to be an honorable soldier. I don't care what this is costing me. I'm going to find Sean, and I'm going to get that negative. All right, then there's help, overhaul, and the perfect ending. So I'm going to go to the next slide because it does a little bit more detail. All right. This kind of plugs it all in for us. So life, we're going to see that what? What do they want? I don't want to go to war. We see a hint of his fear. He even says, I've long since feared, as the opening line. Walter Mitty, we see that he's afraid to send someone an electronic wink, let alone hop on an helicopter and then dive into the ocean to try to get on a ship to go to Iceland. So we get hints of those things. You don't walk onto the page and go, yeah, I'm afraid to just do anything with my life. Maybe if you're writing chick lit like Bridget Jones' Diary. All right, the next thing is the inciting incident. This is really kind of the goal. It's the thing that awakens the secret desire. So whatever your inciting incident is, it has to awaken that secret desire. I want to go on adventures. I want to fight with honor. Or I want to start my own business. I'm not working for the man anymore, whatever that is. And then you have the disappointments and the whys and the roads. These are obstacles that they come across. You can't get a loan to start the business. Obstacles for Benjamin Martin were fighting the British itself, and he was going to, every time they took prisoners, he was going to shoot him until his son challenged him. And he said, okay, we'll give quarter. So he had obstacles in his own moral code. He had obstacles, of course, of a war. Walter had obstacles. He couldn't find Sean. But that you find truths along the way. Benjamin, when he said, okay, we'll give quarter to all of our British prisoners, he found a truth. Hey, I can do this. And then the fear and the lie kind of get challenged a little bit. And then you have help. This is the black moment. Every story has the black moment. Donald Moss describes it as you're going on the story, you're going on the story, you're going on the story, and then bam, it's over. You can't achieve your dream. You can't, it's not going to happen. It's like dead. Can't achieve it. So for Benjamin Martin, what happens? Gabriel gets killed. The evil Colonel Tavington kills him, and he's done. They've burned the town. Gabriel's new bride was burned in the church, and so he goes off to get revenge, and he ends up dead. And so I'm not fighting anymore. Black moment. Walter thinks he cannot find Sean, and then he figures out what goat hockey is. He goes to the Afghan mountains, and he finds him. Tells him the negative is in a wallet that he sent Sean, that he sent Walter, but Walter threw it away. But guess who has a Sean? My Walter box. Mom. I think in that scene that we saw, he threw it in the trash. But she rescued it, and they find the negative. All right, so the black moment means everything we want is over. The war is over. Getting that negative is gone. But then there's help. He finds out that his mom still has the wallet. They come to the colonel of the Continental Forces, says, we need you to be a leader, this is what your son would want, and then he finds the flag that Gabriel was sewing. And so they're at the final battle, the Battle of Cowpens, and here comes Benjamin riding up with that flag, and he rallies the troops, he gives courage to the troops, and he becomes a solid leader there on the open battlefield. And of course he does kill Colonel Tavington like he told him he would. All right, then you have, but he did it with honor. And then you have truth in the new man. Now Walter Mitty knows he's a man of adventure. He has the courage to ask out Cheryl. If you want to think about it, the whole thing was about him having the courage to ask out Cheryl and develop a love life for himself. For Benjamin Martin, there's a kind of a sequel scene where we see that he's kind of falling in love with his deceased wife's sister. And at the end of the movie, we see him coming back. Everyone's coming to rebuild his home that was burned by the British. There's a new baby, so I assume that he married this sister. But he's a man of honor. And he's going to rebuild his life. So we can see that after all of the dark moments, after all of the pain that we walk through, if we continue on in the story, if we have hope, and if you're writing something that has bringing the Lord into the story, of course, he is going to come in and help us. He is going to move in our lives, and then you're the new man. You have truth, and then you can have a perfect ending. The secret desire is now alive, or the greatest dream. The wound is healed. Benjamin Martin healed the wound that he was a dishonorable man. He fought with honor. Walter Mitty healed the lie that he couldn't go on adventures and be responsible. He could do both. Does that make sense?